I've only read 5 Casca books, but I'm confident that it's one of my favorite men's adventure series. These were created in 1979 by Barry Sadler, who was a Green Beret medic and staff sergeant, which I think lends some authenticity to his storytelling. He was also a singer-songwriter, and this is historical military fantasy, and he wrote 22 of these books before he was killed in 1989. And in a nutshell, Casca is a soldier cursed with immortality and who is to remain at war until the second coming of Christ. And each book is a different war, not in chronological order. And while Casca is immortal, he's not necessarily invincible. He can feel pain, and he could be quartered up and buried in boxes under the church to ensure Christ makes a stop there when he comes again. Kind of a publicity stunt. And that's what the Brotherhood of the Lamb want to do in this book. This is the only one I have in this edition, and it just so happens to be my favorite so far. Casca fathers an adopted son and has a wife, and things get super grisly when he has to rescue them from the Brotherhood. And he skins a guy alive, and there's a particularly gruesome crucifixion scene. And there's 2 types of Casca books, these historical adventures, and then there's these 20th century, mid-century modern warfare ones. But I kind of like the historical stories better. Sword and Shield is easier for me to understand than all the calibers and millimeters of modern weaponry and firearms. And this is the last Casca book that Barry Sadler wrote before his unexpected death. And I haven't read it yet, but it's in no way a conclusion. The series continued being written under ghostwriters. And at this point, I suggest if you haven't already, go and listen to the Paperback Warrior, episode 48, titled The Casca Controversy, where they investigate allegations made against one of the Casca ghostwriters, claiming that he plagiarized his Casca books from other novels. And I guess the accused left Casca on his own volition and started writing his own Casca knockoff series. And the accusations continued that he was plagiarizing in these as well. And I was listening to the episode again, just in the background while I was doing some housework, and I caught something at the end that I didn't pick up on the first time. They were saying that one of these Casca knockoff books was a ripoff of a book called The Falcon 1 by Mark Ramsay. And I thought, wait a minute, is that this book? It is. And I had all forgotten that I even had this book. And I'm surprised it even popped into my head when they mentioned it. Because if I was in a bookstore, I probably wouldn't even look at this. The Knight in Shining Armor story isn't really my go-to. But I found this at a Value Village thrift store, and I bought it because of who signed it. And not the author, we'll get to that, but LC and HR. Now, I don't know who they are, but they donated, it must have been close to 100 books of what I call pulp fiction to this Value Village. And I bought a small chunk of it, and I'll show you what I mean to give you an idea of what they had and what I would normally pick up. So first I got a couple James Bond pans, both LC and HR. Maybe it's JC and HR. That's a nice movie tie-in edition. And they had a Man from U.N.C.L.E. book. Looks like just JC on that one. And a couple Matt Helms in really nice shape. JC and HR. And a Honey West book. Okay. Yeah, so they had good taste. They had a couple Shell Scotts too. This was a good one. I like that one. Yeah, Way of a Wonton. And of course they had a bunch of Nick Carters, so I grabbed one of those. And a couple Mike Shanes. And this one's really cool too. They all have this stamp in them too. Watkins Book Exchange and Tobacconist. So you can get your cigarettes and your Pulp Fiction all in one stop. And Mickey Spillane. It's just LC. And of course tons of Executioner. This was one I didn't have. JC and HR. And then some other like mafioso stuff. Like that one, The Invader, Dead Heat. There's also a John D. MacDonald, Travis McGee. They just had one of those. Then some other like frontier and western stuff. The 17th century Canada. LC. They had a Edge, Adam Steele. Look at that. They even had some of the old digest-sized ones. Thomas B. Dewey. Homicide West, In Need of Repair. And here's another Mike Shane, too. Yeah, all signed by JC and HR, and all this stuff that I like. And then there was this one, the one thing not like the others. There was no other fantasy or SF, just a ton of the men's adventure types. But by this point, this is coming highly recommended. I trust JC and HR's taste. They bought it at a tobacco shop. So I thought, I'll give it a try, something different. I didn't even think of Casca, but it sounded pulpy as hell. Draco Falcon was the ultimate warrior in an age of chivalry, sex, and slaughter. So I brought it home, put it on the shelf, and forgot about it for a couple years. But when I heard it was ripped off for a Casca knockoff, I read it right away. And the book that ripped this off is no longer available. I haven't read it, and this is not a side-by-side comparison. But I had high expectations for this book, and it delivered. So much so that I had the other 3 books in the series delivered. It's a 4-book series. And Mark Ramsay is a pseudonym for John Maddox Roberts, who, not unlike Barry Sadler, was a Green Beret. And listen to how he describes himself as Mark Ramsay in the back of the book. Mark Ramsay was born on St. John's Day, 1947. He is a professional writer and he lives on a remote mountaintop in the Appalachian Mountains. When not writing, he pursues his lifelong study of the medieval and classical periods. He makes his own weapons and armor and sometimes fights with them when he can find someone to practice with. He feels this brings a breath of authenticity to his writing. And I believe him. These seem very authentic and historically accurate. And he seems to speak with knowledge about weapon handling and the pros and cons of different armor designs and how armor is constructed differently in different regions and what he prefers to wear, all in great detail. But where these books really shine is in the writing. It's a really well done mashup of modern and old English. It's not old vocabulary, but it's the way he phrases his sentences that have that old English ring to them. And I'm sure John Maddox Roberts could write some beautiful historical prose, but these are very approachable. He knew who he was writing for. He knew the Signet action adventure target market. It's pulpy writing, but it's quite lovely, and I think it would be noticeable if you tried to plagiarize this. So Draco Falcon is a European knight with no lord and has his own army of mercenaries. And while he's not immortal like Casca, he is damn near unstoppable. When he was young, he was fighting in the Crusades with his father, and during a battle, he was struck by lightning and survived. but this left him with a distinguishing white line that runs the length of his body and turns his black hair white where it passes. And he also has a rage mode that kicks in if he gets too angry, but he's been taught how to keep this under control, so it doesn't often happen. And Draco's backstory is told in flashbacks throughout the 4 books. And in this first one, The Falcon Strikes from 1982, we learn that Draco's father was betrayed by 4 men and killed. And Draco is out to get revenge on each of them. And at the end of the first book, he gets revenge on one of them. And before the guy dies, he tells Draco that his dad is still alive. So now, while seeking his revenge, he's also trying to find out the truth about his father. Now enter book 2, The Black Pope, and things get crazy. In the second book, Draco tracks down the second guy on his hit list, who used to be a man of the cloth, but now is into the occult and has become the Black Pope and has his own following. But instead of killing him when he finds him, Draco decides to introduce himself because all the guys he's after know who he is. And he wants to gain this guy's trust and join his congregation in order to be close and find out more about his father before he kills him. So Draco has to pretend to be one of them, but these guys are into some especially heinous modes of sacrifice, which are a kind of group activity that Draco is expected to take part in. And things get wild. This was a particularly gruesome entry. And in the flashbacks, we learn about Draco's mentor and how he got his sweet Damascus sword that's named 3 Moons. But Draco has temporarily renamed it Nemesis after the Greek goddess of vengeance, just until he's gotten his revenge, and then he'll call it 3 Moons again. But in this book, the Black Pope gets away, which I thought was cool because I wanted to see him again. So now enter book 3, The Bloody Cross. And in this book, Draco learns about a threat on the kingdom, and he sees this as a good opportunity to hire out his army to the crown for some big bucks. But one doesn't simply walk up to the round table and sell one's army over a supposed threat. He has to gain the king's attention first. So to do this, he joins a tournament, seeing it as an easy way to win the king's respect. And he chops a guy in half vertically on his horse and splits the guy's saddle, and both sides of the rider in the saddle fall to either side while the horse runs away unscathed. And the author writes a well-informed action scene with lots of detailed swordplay tactics and what it's like to get hit while wearing chainmail. But other than a few flashbacks to remind us of Draco's ongoing mission, nothing happened that moved the story along. There was no Black Pope or either of the other 2 guys, nor did he find out any more about his father. It was very much its own contained story. It was good, but I was a little disappointed that nothing happened. But I was excited for a raging climax where Draco takes them all on in the last book. So enter book 4, The King's Treasure from 1983. Now, I bought these on thrift books. These 2 were like $7 or $8, and this one was $14. And that's because it's signed. And I didn't really care, but it was the only one they had in stock. And it was still cheaper than sussing it out elsewhere and paying shipping again. But it took forever to get to me. I had gotten and read both of the other books before this one even came. And I wanted to read at least the last 3 all back to back. So I checked, and this book is on Internet Archive. In fact, only the first one isn't. So I read the entire thing on Internet Archive before my copy even came. And I tell you this because I've been telling you the story of my experience with these books, and we're reaching the conclusion of that. And there's a bit of a surprise at the end. So in the final book, flashbacks remind us of Draco Falcon's main mission, and other than that, this was its own contained story. There was no conclusion. And because I'm reading this on Internet Archive, I continue to scroll down and I get an action-packed excerpt from Book 5 in the Falcon series titled Greek Fire, which never got released. And I thought, oh, this is a canceled series, which is a shame because Book 5 sounds like one of the best yet. I'm not sure about historical accuracy, but in this one, they're fighting at sea against a ship with a massive cannon that lowers down from the mast and shoots fire and flaming projectiles that explode on impact. But it all makes sense now that I know there was to be more books. But I went into this expecting it to be one tale, one epic 4-book saga, a mini-series, but I guess not. And then, as if on cue, my copy shows up. And you can see it's signed twice, both as Mark Ramsay and again as John Maddox Roberts. But then I'm looking at it, and this folded up paper falls out of the back. And when you buy a book from Thrift Books Collectibles Department, which is where this came from, they show you photos of the actual book you're buying, which isn't the case otherwise. And they showed a picture of this paper, but I didn't look at it. I just bought the book. So I open it up, and it's a note. And get this, it says, Malcolm, Signet was sold without telling any of the authors, and the action-adventure line was dropped. I found out when I phoned for a go-ahead on Falcon Volume 5, and a stranger answered the phone. So all that ever got published was the teaser chapter at the end of Book 4. Best wishes, John Roberts. So it wasn't a canceled series. It was too good for that. But Signet was sold, and the action-adventure line dropped. So basically, I bought this book because I trusted the taste of the people whose collection it came from. I read it when I found out it was ripped off for a Casca knockoff series, and I already knew I liked Casca. And with 4 books and 4 guys to kill, I thought I was in for a complete story. Now I have all 4 books and a signed copy of the book with the first chapter of the unpublished Book 5 and a note from the author explaining what happened. A note that I didn't read until after I finished the series. And I thought I'd show off my collection and share my story. I thought it was funny how it all played out. And it's a good series. I think if you like Casca, you'd like these 2. So keep your eyes out for them. They're good. It's a good series. I'm going to look for more Sword and Shield stuff. But that's all for now. Thanks for watching. Over and out.